Hello and welcome. I'm Michael McMahon, sports editor at the Keene Sentinel. It was a record-setting campaign for the Keene State men's basketball team. The Owls won a program-best 28 games and advanced to the Sweet 16 for the 5th time in program history. They were also undefeated in conference play, where they won the Little East regular season and tournament championships. On today's show, I'm joined by head coach Ryan Cain to discuss this season's thrilling run and what comes next for the Owls. This is Sentinel Sources. How's it going, Ryan?
Great.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, of course. So I think it's safe to say it was a pretty unforgettable season for the community, and if you went to a game at Spalding, it was certainly an electric atmosphere. Now that you've had a couple weeks to settle in since the end of the season, what are some of the most memorable moments for you? I know you said it was, the best experience you've had as a coach in your coaching experience.
Yeah, I mean, just a wonderful season overall. I think it was player-driven from day one all the way through to the end of our season. Just a wonderful group of guys. I think they practiced hard every day. I think they played hard on game day. I think they were coaches on the floor even before we were coaches on the floor. When you go make coaching points, whether it's in practice or games, the guys oftentimes are already talking to each other and coaching each other. Just made it an incredibly easy experience for us as coaches. A lot of moments, I think, on our end that were most enjoyable, probably just the day-to-day. That's what you miss the most. When the season ends, you really just miss being around the guys. But I think there were some cool moments, even just during break, where, typically most colleges don't have a lot of people in the stands. We're playing Emerson shortly after Christmas before the new year, and the gym's borderline packed with community members. Mm-hmm. We had a chance to play against two 5-men that were All-Americans, so awesome opportunities for someone like Jeff, who ended up being an All-American himself, was a preseason All-American, to play against other All-Americans. That Middlebury game, the environment at that Middlebury game, I think was postseason-like, and I think was a kind of indication of what we could expect in Spalding as we got into the postseason. And then obviously as you get into those playoff games, whether it's a semifinal or final, the atmosphere, the way those games went, that championship game, to be able to come back from, being down late in a situation where it looked like, things weren't all that positive, at the free throw line, you missed the free throw, to get an offensive rebound and make a play like that in an environment like that was pretty awesome. And then obviously a chance to host, just incredible. The support from the campus and the community was just off the charts. Our guys having the opportunity to experience that and be able to connect, as you mentioned, whether it was with our campus or with the Keene community, was just an incredible experience. Obviously didn't end necessarily the way we'd like, but just an awesome opportunity to get past that first weekend, something we couldn't do last year. So just another thing for our team to learn from.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that Tufts game sticks out too, the one to advance to the Sweet 16. I think that's one that's going to stick with people for a long time. It was one of those wire-to-wire games that you really couldn't forget. But all 8 seasons that you've been here, you've only had one losing season. It's been a pretty successful run since then, a few NCAA tournaments, a couple Sweet 16s. What's been the key to building that success? I know you talked about creating a player-driven culture. What goes into that, and are you surprised at how quickly you were able to establish that here?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's been a whirlwind of an experience with specifically this group of guys. As you mentioned, we've had one losing season. Jeff was part of that team when we did have that losing season. He was a freshman on that team. And I think there were a lot of lessons learned at that time. And, fortunately for him, given kind of where we're at as a program, he had a chance to play a lot right away. And that can be important for a first-year guy. And I think you saw what it looked like when we weren't successful, so you kind of know what it doesn't look like or what it shouldn't look like when you aren't winning. And then to be able to take that next step, it was the COVID year. But obviously I think we brought in a lot of new faces and a lot of guys that ultimately would play major roles and did have a chance to play major roles early on in that experience. Had some success during that COVID year, lost in the conference championship game. We were one of the few conferences that had a conference championship game. So I think just the opportunity to play in a game like that, despite having a condensed season and nothing being normal at that time, brought a lot of value to those guys and learned a lot of lessons. And then last year, had a chance to take a step forward. 21-7 is a successful year. To be able to beat an incredibly impressive Dartmouth team in a conference tournament championship, the way we were able to do that, probably one of the most exciting finishes to a conference championship game that you'll ever see with an alley-oop dunk.
Right.
Getting into the NCAA tournament, winning a game in the tournament, then having playing a second round game where we didn't play our best. I think we learned a lot from it. and the big thing that we wanted to focus on was establishing that player-driven culture this year. And I think that player-driven culture allows you to sustain success at a level that you wouldn't be able to sustain if it was something that was led by the coach and driven by the coach. And I think that ultimately led us into that level of success, that consistent success, and taking that next step as a program this year. So just credit goes to the guys. We brought in a really good group of guys, really talented players, but wouldn't be able to have that level of success if it wasn't for the leadership in our program. So it feels like it happened fast, but I think on our end there was an intentional process to getting to where we got, and probably felt like it maybe even taken longer than we wanted it to. But hopefully now it's something that we can build on and sustain moving forward.
Yeah, can you kind of define like what player-driven means? Because obviously, anybody who goes to a game, you're very much in control of the ship on the bench. You're an intense coach. You're very, active with the guys. But so, I mean, what does it mean when you say player-driven? What specifically are the guys doing to kind of, lead the ship of the program?
It's actually a wonderful question because it's probably everything that people don't get to see. It's the way the guys act and behave in practice. It's the way the guys lead and coach in practice. Do they care more about how we stretch and how detail-oriented we are going from drill to drill and rep to rep? What kind of environment do we create? Do we create an environment where guys show up to practice and have a lot of fun and have the opportunity to compete and play at the highest level every single day? We can ask that of them as coaches, but it only happens if the players are the one that develop a standard and hold each other to that standard on a daily basis in practice. And we were able to do that this year. We were able to have great practices day in, day out. We were able to have a group of guys that, I think I mentioned it earlier, but literally, when we blow the whistle in a drill, they'll be coaching each other and interacting with each other in practice and honestly saying things to each other that we would have been saying to them if they weren't the ones saying it. So instead of being the one to necessarily make the teaching point, you're like, hey, did you already tell that guy about the spot that he was supposed to be in? Did you already tell that guy where he was supposed to be on that offensive set? And oftentimes the guys were like, yep, already talked to him, got that, coach, we're good here. Pretty neat to be in that type of position. And that's where I think people don't have the opportunity when I talk so much about that player-driven culture to see what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. But that's really what it is, creating an environment where those guys consistently, whether it's a practice or a game, play at the highest level and hold each other accountable.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to get a little bit into your X's and O's. I think a lot of fans would be interested to know, where do some of your coaching motivations come from, and what are the fundamentals of your system?
Yeah, I mean, I had a chance to play for some of the best coaches in the country at the level that I was playing at the time, whether it's high school. I played for the all-time winningest coach in Massachusetts state basketball history. He's still coaching at this point, St. John's in Shrewsbury. And then in college, played for Chris Bartley. Chris Bartley is one of the best coaches in New England. They're consistently a team that wins 20 or more games every year. He's as good as anybody in the region, if not the country. He's very detail-oriented, very defensive-minded, but also enables his players in the offensive end to play more of a motion-based system. And obviously that's how we play on offense. We definitely have our sets and we have our concepts that our guys play out of. Those concepts, I think, give the guys structure to be able to read the defense and make the right play and do what they think is right offensively. And then, despite being a team that averages over 85 points a game, statistically, we're actually a better defensive team than we are an offensive team. You may not necessarily always get that when you come to a game, but if you look at some of our stats on the defensive end of the floor, the metrics, the more advanced metrics defensively, we were ranked in the top 10 in the country for the most part on defense. We definitely have some concepts that we try to emphasize, some stats, some advanced analytics. We're one of the top 10 teams in the country in terms of defense guarding the three-point line. Three-point rate, we're in the top 10% in the country. And then assist percentage is another thing that we do a really good job of, not giving teams the chance to get assisted baskets. So the way we play is kind of built around those concepts. We don't want to help much. We want to play the ball one-on-one as much as possible. When we do help, we don't want to keep two on the ball. And obviously there's a pace that we play at on both ends. We don't want to allow teams to be comfortable on offense. I think everybody can see that when they come watch us play. There's definitely a lot of pressure that we play with on and off the ball defensively, and I think that carries over to the pace that we're able to play at on offense. And then basically the way we play on offense is if we have an advantage, we want to play to the advantage and not run anything. and keep that advantage until we get a great shot. If we don't have an advantage, then of course, like everybody else, we want to get into some kind of action to try to generate that advantage. And then every once in a while, run a set to try to get a guy the ball in a position we want to get that guy the ball to try to create that advantage against the matchup.
Yeah, so, and obviously, you kind of play with the hand you're dealt, and you've had a lot of different star players here in your 8 years. I think back to Ty Nichols was probably one of the best isolation players Keene State's ever had, and now you have a terrific post guy, one of the best in the country, in Jeff Hunter. When you're building your roster, it's obviously a lot different at the D3 level than the D1, but are you building to a system, or are you finding players and then adjusting your system around those guys?
Yeah, another fantastic question. At our level, it definitely is recruit the best possible player you can, figure out what their skill sets are, what their strengths are, and then build your offensive and defensive systems around that. If we didn't have a 6'7" athlete, then we probably would look at playing defense a little bit different. But because we have a rim presence, it allows us to guard the ball a certain way and play our defense a certain way, knowing that you have that type of player on the back end of your defense. And then obviously offensively, if we didn't have a post player, you're probably more spreading out, shooting more, but with Jeff, and he has his own strengths. He's not a 6'10", 250-pound post player that you sit on the block and throw the ball to. You start him on the perimeter. You roll him down into the post. You get him the ball once he rolls down into the post. You try to get the defense moving before you post him up. And then you give him a chance at that point once he rolls down to the post to play to an advantage.
Okay, yeah. So just kind of go a little bit deeper on kind of Jeff's game and what stands out there particularly, and how how he can adjust in the post, how he can be that down low player, how he can play in the high in the post. Kind of build on his game a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest strength of Jeff is definitely the type of leader and type of person that he is. I think that player-driven leadership definitely starts with him. He's a captain of ours. He knows exactly what we want out of our offense every single play. A lot of teams will run their offense through their point guard. We run our offense through Jeff. He's the guy that handles the ball at the top of the key when we need to get into action. He's the guy that communicates to the other players on the court what we should be running at that point. Oftentimes, it's not a play call that comes from the bench. It's something that they read on the floor that we should get into. At times, we definitely go into games saying, here are the 3 or 4 things we want to get into, and then Jeff has the ability to get us into those things. Jeff has a pretty diverse skill set. He has the ability to get into action, and then when guys create advantage, be able to roll down to the rim with that advantage and give guys the chance to find him if he's open. And then obviously his roll to the basket has some gravity to it, so whether he's getting the ball and is the one scoring or making the play, it may collapse the defense to the point where it gives other guys advantages at the same time. He has the ability to play out of a face-up. He likes to go right. I think everybody knows that. His game is to go to his right and spin back to his left if he doesn't have an advantage, but he does have the ability to finish with his right hand. And then obviously in the post, he's as fundamental and as skilled as any post guy in the country. His footwork is off the charts. He's not going to blow you away with his speed necessarily, but with his ability to make multiple moves, to pivot, kind of those McHale-type plays, Kevin McHale, Boston Celtics, little old-school throwback with lots of fakes and lots of great footwork to generate that advantage to ultimately score with either hand.
He's a lefty too, which is a little different than a lot of players. Is a different matchup. But with Jeff, obviously you have an All-American there. You have another All-American in Octavio Brito. Both those guys are back. That is not a common thing in Division III basketball. So just going off of that alone, how high has the bar already been set for expectations going into next season?
Yeah, the goal going into this year was to win a national championship. And the buy-in around that in our program I thought was off the charts. And the whole goal is to basically align your process with your goal and have that process on a daily basis. And I thought our guys did a tremendous job of that. And then I think the consistent success that we had, obviously going 28-2, being able to make a little bit of a run in the NCAA tournament, I think shows our guys that bar that we've set, that goal that we've set, and that process that we've tried to establish, it's real, it's tangible. As you mentioned, there's one other team in the country that has 2 All-Americans. That other team won the national championship. They bring those guys back. So I think being able to return the core of our group, only losing one guy that played major minutes, the goal is real. It's tangible. It's something we can accomplish. To get there, we got to get better. Our process has to improve. Our guys have to develop some skills. We need to bring in some players that I think can add some different skill sets that our group doesn't currently have. But that's the goal. Our goal is to win a national championship. Bring a national championship to Keene State College and the Keene community. It's something we can do. It's not easy to do. There's a lot of luck that goes into it. There's matchups that go into it. Playing your best basketball at the end of the season. It's a bit of a war of attrition as well. The team that's healthy, the team that's able to be in that position to play as well as they can play. A lot of factors go into it, but it's an attainable goal, and I think the type of success that we had this year put it in perspective for our players in our program.
We're certainly looking forward to watching next season.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, I want to thank Coach Cain again for coming on, and thank you for joining us on another edition of Sentinel Sources. For the Keene Sentinel, I'm Michael McMahon. We'll see you next time.